Good morning, ladies and gentlemen out there in Warrior Nation. Mr. Mike Seeklander is joining us once again today. Welcome back to your show, Mr. Seeklander.
Good morning, folks. I hope everybody that jumps on is having a fantastic day, man. How's things?
Things are fantastic. My studio does not have air conditioning in it, so I'm doing it from the dining room this morning. But if you listen to the podcast to come, it won't make any difference. Just listen to the sound of my soothing voice, man. Excited about the show today, man. I've entitled it "An Anatomy of an Attempted Political Assassination," and this is going to be a case study specific to the recent attempted assassination on the 45th president of the United States.
Yeah, folks, this is hopefully going to be an interesting show to you. We know it's going to be an interesting show, but we wanted to give kind of a different perspective. So, full disclosure, Rich and I had a conversation pre-show actually yesterday about this show, and I said, I'm not certain if I want to touch this one. It seems like everybody and their brother is online, on Instagram or whatever else, and they all have an opinion about this deal. And all of the guys assessing all this stuff, and there's all this negative energy out there, which is, certainly this whole event is an unbelievable event, critical to our nation's history. Had it went the other way, if Donald Trump was dead right now, I don't know if that would have been the tipping point for this country, but it likely would have been, in my opinion. So we're going to talk about some things that you might not have heard. Of course, it's nice and early here, 7:30 a.m., 6:30 Mountain Time. I guess that would be 5:30 on the left coast. If you're up with us right now, do us a favor, give us a share. And Rich, can I talk sponsors real quick before we get into the show?
Please, man, go for it.
Hey, folks. So first of all, if you haven't been on our show, if you're new to this show and you're listening to my voice right now and you haven't been on the AmericanWarriorShow.com, you should jump on there. And the reason is there's a show notes series of pages, and every one of those show notes pages is searchable. So if you're like, hey, I want to listen to the show with Hoyce Gracie, you can search Hoyce Gracie. If you want to listen to the show with whoever, you can search and you can find the individual show notes pages. Now, those show notes pages have all of the links to all of the things we've referenced in the show, to and including a podcast player. So you can open up a show notes page and you can listen to the show right there. And then you can take that individual page and share it to a friend. Sometimes that might be easier than sharing this show, for example, on Spotify. Then again, if you're listening to me on Spotify right now, you can also share this podcast. So please make sure you visit AmericanWarriorShow.com. You'll find all of our sponsors. I know Rich and I carry with the Precision Holsters Ultra Appendix inside the waistband holster most of the time. Of course, that's one of the best Ultra Appendix specific design for appendix carry holsters I have ever seen or ever utilized. They are my full line of competition holsters, owned and operated by Big John, maybe Little John out there in California. Fantastic guy. He will get on the phone with you for an entire hour and talk holsters. Now, of course, Rich, you are a big fan of Mr. Shan's Works holsters for a light-bearing solution if you're carrying a weapon mounted light. Talk to the audience briefly about that.
Yeah, man, if you're looking for the interesting thing is, at first Mike and I were really reticent to do two holster sponsors. However, I think each one of them has their own niche. With John, you've got the Ultra Appendix over there at Precision. You've also got the fast line of competition holsters, which are fantastic. But if you're looking for the ultimate light bearing holster, please check out works.com. Links in show notes page. As Mike already said, I carry a G45 with a TLR7 on it, and it is fantastic. I cannot speak more highly enough.
Absolutely. And folks, you'll find all of the other sponsors listed. Not going to go through all of them today, but sponsors like Cool Fire Trainer, Tip Top Canine Training, who did some personal dog training for me recently, which I can absolutely put the stamp of approval on these guys. They are fantastic. And they actually have a program where you can apply to build your own business, to open up your own Tip Top Canine Training business with a click on that link, and you apply for their program. So check that out. So get on AmericanWarriorShow.com. Check all of that out. Of course, I am here in the Livefire studio. If you're not following me on Livefire, you got to. For you coin members, we do have a coin member group on Livefire. So get in there, request access. You're going to have to message me your coin number. We don't have an algorithm or a database that automatically validates your coins. So please make sure you do that. If you're on Livefire and you're in the coin members group or you've sent a request in and you haven't been approved, I've probably messaged you. You need to respond to that message and give me your coin number and make sure we let you in. There's also an Art of Instruction group in there that Rich Brown is a member of. And for you USCCA instructors that bought the book through the book special, you can get in there. So please, if nothing else, folks, get on Livefire, get on Livefire Social. It's 100% free. If you like what you see, you should consider an Alliance membership, a premium membership. I'm here in the studio. They have recently done some updates that even Rich doesn't probably know about, and are about to do another round of updates that are going to make this tool what it should have been in the very beginnings, had we known some of the things we did along the development. And one thing I'll tell you, as Rich knows, developing a company, developing a website, developing an app is hard work. It takes a lot of time. And folks, with Livefire, we are this close to having the single best digital training tool you could possibly imagine. If you're on the ACE system and you want to log your training, if you're shooting Livefire and you want to log your training, if you want to use the countdown part timer, it's fantastic. It auto logs your results. You'll be able to see your metrics, etc. That's if you're an Alliance member. So get on. If nothing else, follow me on social, because Rich, did you before we get to the show, did you hear about YouTube's new release? How YouTube is now, YouTube just did another policy update. So I know what is it, Hitchcock 45, or I think it's Hitchcock 45. He has a huge YouTube channel. It's this shooting washing machines kind of content, not poo-pooing on that, but anyways, they just put a big message out that said, hey, YouTube did a policy update, and which eliminates their ability to have firearms related content or firearms related sponsorships. And if you and I don't know the specifics, all of the specifics, but if you violate those policies, they can delete your page. So these guys are scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on. Hey, here at Livefire, we're like, we told you so, right? We've been trying to build this out for years now, going, hey, this is a gun-friendly community. If you're into the app and those kind of social feeds, this is your world. So get on Livefire. It's on the Apple, Google Play Store, and the Apple App Store. Download it. Try out social. Give me a follow. I'll give you a follow back, and you'll enjoy it. So.
And one final thing, we've been suffering with this, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or whomever. This is the way of the world. If you can't recognize the fact that we're sliding this way, man, I don't know what to tell you. You've been living under a rock or something. But I know I'm speaking to the choir for everyone that's listening to Mike and I this morning. The final thing we did not, the sponsor we did not talk about, we got two of them more to mention, is Appalachian Standard, makers of the finest CBD products your money can possibly buy. They got salves if you got a sore shoulder, whatever you're training or overtraining potentially. They got some salves to take care of you. They also have some drops to help you sleep better. And the final one is Mountain Man Medical, man. I tell you what, this assassination attempt that we're going to talk about this morning is a great example of why you need to be having medical. And I'm sure the Secret Service were tending to the president in the limo on the way to the hospital, getting him checked out. If you don't have one in your limo, or your F-150 or your Tundra or whatever you got, you need to pick one up. So please, please, please check out AmericanWarriorShow.com. Right-hand side of the page, Mountain Man Medical. We got an incredible discount. We got a co-branded trauma kit. You need to have one in your home, probably in your vehicle, etc. And they make not only great products over there at Mountain Man Medical, they got free training. You can actually download certificates once you complete the training. It's absolutely free, deep discounts. So please check that out.
Yeah, the content on their website is fantastic, folks. Like really, really good. And Rich, I got to mention two more things, man. First of all, let me see if I can do this without breaking my. Oh, can you see? Oh, there you go.
Nice.
Check out the shirt, folks. Anyways, those shirts are on the Shooting Performance web store. And full disclosure, I have been, for those that don't know this, I have been replacing all product shipments on a new company that fulfills. Now I have books, I have DVDs, I have USBs, I have the new log books with the coil stitching. So all of the products are back on my website. They've been down for a long time because the previous shipper completely dropped the ball. It's a long story. I'm not going to give it to you folks, but it was a company that just did not do a great job for me. So I took a month to switch everything over. So please, if you're listening to my voice and you're looking for a training product, your defensive handgun training program, your competition handgun training program, your defensive rifle training program, the Art of Instruction that Rich co-wrote with me, all of the DVDs, the logbooks, and USBs, so you can get all of the digital content on USBs for those offline situations where you want to watch your program. So check them out at shooting-performance.com. And folks,
Classic shirts are up, guys. And guess what? The fulfillment is this guy sitting right here. We had such a terrible experience with third party shippers that all the classic, we got hoodies, we got shirts, they're all in stock, ready to ship to you. Click the links in today's show notes to find out more about that. And Mike, I think, are we done with all of our
we are,
pre-show
man.
stuff?
Let's jump into the show, folks.
All right, real quick, we got some amazing folks watching us live. John, Walt, Will, Alan, etc. Guys, thank you so much for being on today. Dr. Fuller, Bruce, Tony, please like and hit that share button. And if you're listening to his final thing, look, we haven't asked for reviews for a long time. I'm asking for a review. Okay. And the reason I'm doing that is somebody gave us a 2-star review or 1-star, like, hey, let me know when this is, when you're not talking about politics or something like that. We've been forced into this position, much like a lot of other media folks out there. It's not someplace Mike and I ever wanted to be. However, it would be, I think it would be some sort of malpractice if we didn't talk about these things, which is why we're going to take a look at this case study. And for disclosure, man, neither Mike nor I are PSD experts at all. You know, I've been to some training in PSD. I've done a little bit of it. I've been a cop. Mike's been a cop, federal law enforcement, etc. You know, we've been in and around this kind of thing. We're not going to take a deep dive into it. You know why? Because the facts aren't out yet. And anybody that's trying to give you their armchair opinion probably weren't there that day, number one. And number two, don't have all the facts, because I'm constantly learning something new. So this is going to kind of look at it from a holistic perspective. And we're going to break it down in 6 steps. Number 1, plant the seeds for political violence. Step 2, radicalize the useful idiots to conduct that violence. Step 3, enact the violence. Step 4, ineffectual government leadership response to the violence. Step 5, mainstream media misinformation campaign. And step 6, act surprised, call for calm, and shift the blame. So that's kind of how we're going to break today's showdown. Mike, anything to add before we go any further?
No, folks, and we're also going to do what the American Warrior Show and the American Warrior Society does, is educate and train. So along the way, you know, we're going to talk about some of the things we saw during this attempted assassination, and understand, you know, we're not necessarily passing judgment. You know, when I'm in a class, Rich, and I give feedback to a student, I'm not passing judgment on that student. I'm simply telling them, hey, here's some factors that are affecting your ability to perform on demand under stress. I try to tell people these days when they ask, well, what do you really do? Well, I am a performance specialist. And my interests go way outside of firearms, but that's what I look at is, hey, how do you better perform under stress, or how do you better train yourself to perform in a variety of environments? So we could talk about, you know, the initial reaction of the agents there. Certainly they weren't not all Secret Service, and I'm certain Rich is going to get into that, but we're here to educate and train and help folks out, make you better. So hopefully, as always, when bad things happen, you know, the American Warrior Show brings you lessons, and we can learn from these lessons. And that's the entire goal of this show.
Yeah, well said, man. Alan says we may get the facts, but I'm being cynical. We may not get the information with this chaotic administration. He has a good point. If you look at the amount of hard drives that were carried out of Jeffrey Epstein's brownstone in New York City, you would say, well, where's that information? Because we've got one dead Epstein and one Giselle Maxwell, and yet we know there was the client lists were, you know, longer than a phone book probably. So we may not, and he's absolutely right. Let's take a look at this. Step 1, and this is probably the most important step of this whole thing, because without this causal chain, without this first link in the causal chain, none of this would happen, in my opinion. So let's look at some things. You have Kathy Griffin starting way back in 2016, you know, with this bloodied, severed head of the presumptive president at the time, President Trump, holding his severed head. And, you know, some people applauded, some people were shocked by it. But I have to say, man, this is the kind of stuff that leads here. Let me read this real quick, Mike, then we'll get your thoughts on it. Robert Page, a political scientist at the University of Chicago who has studied American attitudes toward political violence since January the 6th, attack on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob, conducted a nationwide poll on the topic last month, just in June of 2024. It found that 10% of those surveyed said that the use of force is justified to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. A third of those who gave that answer also own firearms. So think about that. 10% of the people surveyed said that use of force is morally and probably legally justified. Now, there's another 7% of those surveyed that said they support force to restore the president. And that speaks to something you said at the beginning, and we're going to touch on at the end. Would his assassination have been an unraveling of this country? With that kind of polling data, because all you need is probably 3% of the population hardcore in one way, just like we saw with the American Revolution, and you have a revolution. When I see polling data like this, 10% one way and 7% the other, it leads me to believe we were on the cusp and may still be.
Yeah, we may still be rich, and I certainly hope not. I think that one of the things that the listeners of this show probably already have done is visualize the possibility of violence at that scale and that level. I think it's very easy to, for example, in a full disclosure, I mean, I tend to lean toward the right in politics. You know, I probably voted Republican for every presidential candidate simply because of the anti-gun rhetoric that the left pronounces, and I found that the candidate on the right has, in my opinion, been a better leader. You know, those are, you know, I tend to be more conservative. I don't care if people know that. That's understand that's me. That's Mike Seeklander. I have great friends that are, and family members that are very, very, very far left, that have hugely different opinions. And here's the deal. I respect their right to have those opinions. And I think they respect my right to have my opinions, at least my family and friends do. I'm not certain that I would say that everybody from what I've seen on the left does, but I'm not going to label the left or right. I am going to say this, though. If we were to visualize violence on a massive scale, where it's left versus right, Republican versus Democratic, you know, liberal versus conservative, I don't think people understand what that blood would actually be like. It's still hard for me to imagine the fact that we had an actual civil war, right? So, as Americans, we're in the United States of America. And as much as I disagree with the leadership policies of some of those that I would label on the left, at the same time, we are American citizens. We are the United States of America. And I think it's critical that people really, truly consider what that means and think about what that would actually be like to be shooting and killing their neighbors. And this poll, as you said, Rich, that, you know, 10% on one side, 7% on another side may embrace, in their opinion, violence, physical violence to, you know, to sway a presidency is a very scary time. I think people need to be realistic about this. And I'm going to be honest with you. There's some mainstream folks on social, Rich, and I don't know if you follow them, but I'm not going to mention their names or poo-poo them online here, but they tend to be these tough touting individuals that want to talk about, I'm got my AR and all my equipment and my plate vest and all this stuff, and I'm ready to go. And granted, I have all those things for defensive purposes for my family and defensive purposes for my nation and maybe defensive purposes for my neighborhood if necessary. But even if you are the farthest political spectrum away from me, that I disagree with wholeheartedly, as an American, the thought of killing you never enters my mind. I may not like you. I may not want to be around you. I may think you're a complete, for lack of a better term, fucking idiot. But that doesn't mean I want to kill you. And I think people need to step back and reflect a little bit, you know?
Well, we've got historical amnesia here. It's like you said, Mike, this idea that, you know, it can't happen here. Guys, it has happened here. And I'll tell you right now with the, you know, President Biden, you know, has been talking about former President Trump being a threat to democracy, and yet this man has subverted democracy by saying, "I will run, therefore I'll just go ahead and presumptively take this party's nomination." And now his party's telling him to stop. Matter of fact, we're going to withhold $90 million from your campaign, and he's still saying, "I won't step down." So, the reason I bring that up because we're talking about the Civil War. The Democratic convention leading up to the 1860 presidential election was split. They went into the convention. They couldn't decide who the nominee was going to be, so it split into two. and that was one of the catalysts for the American Civil War. So we've been here before. My great grandfather, I remember my great grandfather when I was a little boy telling me about how they killed his grandfather. So he had hid out in the mountains of East Tennessee during the Civil War because he wanted to join the Union, and they wouldn't take him because he was 45. So he hid out in the mountains, and his wife and daughters brought him food to a bunch of other men who wasn't on board with the Confederacy. Well, guess what? After the war was over, there was still score settling that went on for decades. What I mean by that is they came and killed my great grandfather and threw his ass over the fence and went down. And this is coming from my great grandfather himself before he passed away back in the early 80s. He said they went down there and told my grandma, said, your husband's laid up there over the stump. We shot and killed him. And so the next day they moved to North Carolina. I don't want to live in that world, man, but we came a hair's breadth, and we still may not be out of the woods. And this is the kind of stuff that leads to this. The Washington Post, and let's see the date on this. I think it was pretty recently. Yeah, this is December of 2023. They had an opinion piece in the Washington Post. Yes, it's okay to compare Trump to Hitler. Don't let me stop you. And if you're listening to the podcast, unfortunately, you cannot see a lot of this incendiary stuff, but all you have to do is do a Google search, guys. I have 3 different instances where the media has put out there pictures of Trump in the crosshairs. The first one I have here for you, it was in 2016. The middle one with Trump in the crosshairs is from an Irish magazine in 2017. And the third and final one is in 2018. So this is something that it takes a long time for these seeds to bear fruit, but I promise you eventually they will. All you have to do is Google Trump and Hitler. And this is from the New Republic magazine. This came out in June of 2024. American fascism. What would it look like? And my point is this: who wouldn't want to take that shot? If you knew you could get in a time machine right now, Mike Seeklander, with all the training you have, and go back and kill Hitler in mid-30s, 1930s, and stop the slaughter of 6 million innocent Jews, who wouldn't jump in that time machine and take that shot? So my point is, when you create this incendiary rhetoric, all you're doing is planting seeds for some asshat with no life to think this is my chance for immortality. Am I making too much of that?
No, you're not making too much of it. As a matter of fact, that's the great direction. And if you're listening to this right now, you know, highly likely that if you're a fan of the American Warrior Show, you probably tend to be a little bit more conservative. You probably tend to have voted Republican, but I hope a lot of you, because I know a lot of our members are actually maybe left-leaning Democrats or independents that have voted those ways. You know, we embrace everybody. As an organization, the American Warrior Society is about self-defense. So we are apolitical. You can be any political, any color, any race. You can be from anywhere. If you are into self-defense and you have a righteous heart and you're a good person, we want you as a member. But Rich, we need to communicate it very, very clearly that this is the problem. You know, the problem is not the political parties or how people believe or vote. Everybody has the right to their own opinion. That's why it's called the free United States of America. But what we cannot do is we cannot accept these organizations, these media organizations, embracing and promoting this level of potential violence or whatever else. And by the way, folks, the document that we're referencing for today's show will be in the show notes. Maybe I'll have Rich export that as a PDF or whatever easy file and put it in the show notes. You could download it. But the bottom line is, if the media is embracing that and allowing that to be printed, those editors, that editor-in-chief should be fired from either side. You know, we have got to stop this. The American people have been divided by 2 things: by social media, which who knows what the social media algorithms are influenced by. I think some of it probably is foreign actors. I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but we've talked about that for years. We know that. And the media. So as Americans, however you vote, you know, we have got to make a stand and say, we will not allow you to separate us anymore. If I am reading a conservative magazine or a conservative blog and they have Biden in the crosshairs, and full disclosure, I can't stand Biden right now in terms of his leadership ability. He's a frail old man. You know, if you've ever voted Democratic and you decide you're going to vote for him, folks, think about that for a second. I'm not trying to sway your vote. I'm just saying.
My mom just died from dementia, Mike. So I'm telling you, I see the hallmarks there.
Man,
If he wasn't a demented old man, I would probably feel sorry for him. But knowing what, again, if you haven't read The Laptop from Hell, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but my point is that there's some criminality there that, it tempers my pity for him, I guess is what I'm getting at.
100%, 100%. And, and I think that this is not a political show, but folks, just I guess my point there is what I was trying to say there is if a conservative magazine, a conservative blog, any post came out and they were embracing, Biden and he's in the crosshairs and let's put the iron sights on his forehead or the red dot on his forehead, I would be opposed to that. Just like I'm opposed to some of these smack talkers on Instagram that are tough guys with their rifles and plates and whatever else, and they're talking about, oh, I'm excited what's going to go on. Now, granted, if there were some ships hovering over the United States right now, and we weren't certain if this was about to be an alien invasion, I'd be like, yeah, cool. Everybody plate and knot up, get your ARs. Let's see what's going to happen. This is going to be some fun times. But that's not. We're talking about the other side, the American, my family members that are on the other side. Some really incredible friends that I literally love in Montana and Oregon that are on the other side. So these are our people, folks, and we got to stop the divide. I'll tell you that. That's a key thing, Rich. The interesting thing about this is if this doesn't stop, then it just continues. And if it continues, then whoever wins the election, if it's Biden, then everybody in the Republican side is the votes. They made up the votes, and who knows? Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. It doesn't matter. It just divides us more. If Donald Trump is elected, it divides us more. So I think I would love to reach out to everybody that's probably common to you and I, Rick. Just say, hey, what do you actually believe in? The large majority of them, not the ranters we see online, but the large majority of folks listen to my voice right now, or that could listen to my voice, probably feel about the same as I do. We're okay paying some taxes. We want a government to protect us. We probably don't want to give our hard-earned money away. I don't care what side. And you may be a little bit more liberal and say, yeah, I think we should provide more social welfare for different people. Okay, granted, we can discuss that. We can have those things, but we got to stop the division and this political violence crap, that's been allowed on the behalf of Trump. And some of the stuff that these folks are saying on talk shows and whatever else. And Rich, let me ask you this. I actually saw this quick clip. I sent it to you on Instagram. And one of these actress retards was talking about, she was directly threatening Trump, in my opinion, or the way I thought her statement was. I didn't think you could legally do that.
You can't, like Kathy Griffin, when she put that severed head up there. Yeah, the DOJ knocked on her door and had a long sit down with her, and several people that, like, Madonna said something like this. Johnny Depp has said something like this. I mean, but again, it goes back to, and we talk about this in our firearms instructor development course. If I say, do not think of a blue baseball, a blue basketball, do not think of a blue basketball. Don't do it. My point of saying that is, of course, you're going to think of it. So when you see this incendiary image of Trump in the crosshairs again and again and again by the media, eventually you can visualize Trump in the crosshairs. And that's what we're getting at here. So let's get to the next thing. Who wouldn't want to take that shot? So again, fanning the flame, and it's not just mainstream media, man. I'm going to give President Biden a lot of the vitriol he deserves for getting this ball rolling here. In a forcible condemnation of Trump, Biden warns that MAGA backers pose a grave threat to democracy. This came out a couple months ago in a speech. But if you go back to his Fight for the Soul of America speech, and this is taken directly off whitehouse.gov, you can go read the full text of the speech. He said it in September of 2022. And I'm going to read it real quick. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundation of our republic. And here, in my view, is what is true. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They promote an authoritarian leader, and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country. But while the threat of American democracy is real, I want to say as clear as we can, we are not powerless in the face of these threats. We are not bystanders in this ongoing attack on democracy. And folks, it is within our power, it is within our hands, yours and mine, to stop the assault on American democracy. I could go on. This is right off the White House website. My point is, this is the same rhetoric we saw in Sierra Leone that had the RUF chopping hands off. This is the same rhetoric we saw in Rwanda that had the Hutus slaughtering the Tutsis, 800,000 slaughtered in 100 days. This is the same rhetoric that I guarantee you that kid was rolling through his mind when he was climbing that ladder to do the assassination attempt. And this administration needs to own their part in this, because that's a picture taken from him with the Marines flanked in the background saying that 75 million Americans that voted for the 45th president of the United States to have a second term is a threat to democracy. That's me, you, and a lot of people that you know and love. And I think that that was reckless. It wasn't just negligent. I think it was beyond reckless. What do you think?
I agree. And first of all, let's be realists here. There's rarely a politician or a political party that will take responsibility for anything they've done. I think that's one of the things that we've forgotten as the American public, is how much we dislike politicians, because they tend to lie for a living. They tend to lie for votes. Not all politicians, not all politics are bad. Certainly, they are our nation's leaders. But if you think about the system we've created, the system is, how do I get more votes? How do I get more votes? How do I get more votes? How do I get more money so I can expose myself to more people to get more votes? It's completely based on that. But I don't expect Biden to take responsibility for any of those statements. But he's not the only politician that has said that someone that looks like me, an American male, Caucasian, gun owner, probably MAGA supporter, conservative, is the enemy. So that's one of the things that, if you're listening to my voice and you tend to be on the other side of the aisle, whatever that means, is you need to check your party. You need to check yourselves and say, whoa, we probably shouldn't be calling Mike Seeklander, a white American male gun owner that has fought for this country and believes in freedom, the enemy. That's probably not a good direction. And that's something the other side needs to check themselves on. Biden won't check himself on anything. That was a speech that was written by someone else that he simply read. It probably didn't have an interpretation of what he was reading when he read it.
Yeah.
Does he believe it? Who knows, Rich, at this point in time? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Tony says we've had 3 full generations of liberal educational indoctrination. We are reaping what we have sown. Totally true. Kyle is on from the Philippines. Will is on. Pat is on. We got Buffalo Ridge Defense up there with Pat Cahill. Matt is on. Gerald, thank you so much to the 16 folks watching us live. Please like and hit that share button, guys. We're going to move on to step 2, radicalize the useful idiots to violence. And these are just 6 steps that I thought of when I looked at it from, again, my degree is in social psychology. So I tend to look at how these things work within our culture. So what is a useful idiot? You know, people throw that word around. It's a naive or credulous person who can be manipulated or exploited to advance a cause or political agenda. So, and I tell you, if you really want to understand this concept, I highly encourage you to read Eric Hoffer's The True Believer. My good friend Michael Gentili turned me onto this book in excess of 20 years ago. It is a fantastic work to understand the appeal of mass movements, how an individual can be attracted to a mass movement, and the psychological motivations behind what makes him or her participate in these movements, whether it's Antifa, the Proud Boys, the KKK, BLM, any of these extremist movements that we've seen sweeping across our country. If you want to understand it, whether it's ISIS, the Taliban, all of it can be found here. The nature of the true believer, the characteristics of someone who's willing to climb a ladder, the fanaticism, the devotion, the willingness to sacrifice for their cause, what role do these things play in society, the dangers of fanaticism, etc. So just can't recommend it enough. I've talked about this guy before, the gentleman on the left. If you're watching the thing, this is probably the most important person in the 20th century, which nobody's heard of, and they sure as hell can't pick him out of a lineup. And that's Gavrilo Princip. Gavrilo Princip's assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand and his wife in Sarajevo, which set off World War One. This one assassination led to the casualties of 40 million human beings, 20 million deaths, and 21 million wounded. This is astounding that one political assassination could do that. And again, the American Civil War, the young man on the right here is our other useful idiot. I'm not even going to say his name on the show. I'll try not to because I don't want to give this guy any credence. But the 4 years of World War One, 40 million casualties, 20 million deaths. 4 years, just the American Civil War, between 750,000 and 851,000 deaths. Roughly 2% of the United States died in our Civil War, and I think we were pretty damn close, man. Let's talk about this guy real quick. I won't say his name. We all know who it is. A lot of it is being made that he's a registered Republican in Pennsylvania. Mike, this guy's a registered Republican. Well, guess what? The left has been saying for years: go and register as a Republican so you can vote in the frickin' primary, because you can only vote in the primary if you're already declared. Did he do that? I don't frickin' know, man. But what makes me think he may have done that is because he made a $15 donation to a progressive turnout project, which is a Chicago-based political action committee. And if you look at the thing, it's just, we just support key Democratic constituencies, young people, minorities, low income. Well, I screen grabbed this Saturday before they could pull this damn thing down, because this is what the project that this kid spent $15 on. And when you're a young man, you don't have a whole lot of money. For you to take your damn credit card out, get online and add in the number and put that money on where your mouth is, says a lot. So here's what they said Saturday morning, 9 a.m. before Trump's political assassination. And I'm going to read it off here, right off X. It's simple, people. Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy, and another 4 years of him would be detrimental to our country, end quote. So if this kid is following them on X, he's giving money to him, so we know he supports their cause, and he reads that, and he's already leaning that way. And then the screenshot that they're using, this progressive turnout project, is the choice is simple. Donald Trump will destroy our democracy. I will defend it. And that's a quote from the 46th president, Joe Biden. This rhetoric has consequences. And I'm going to a couple of quotes here from Eric Hoffer from the book, The True Believer. The true believer, no matter how rowdy and violent his acts, is basically an obedient and submissive person. The fanatical believer is not conscious of his envy, malice, pettiness, or dishonesty. There's a wall of words between his consciousness and his real self. Thoughts, Mike?
I don't really have any logical response to that, man. I don't know if I could offer anything with the audience that's listening right now, other than the fact that this rhetoric that we have allowed to go completely off the rails is almost unbelievable. Like, I think if you were a voting member of either any party at all, any political party ever, and somehow we could take a time machine and say, this is how the media communicates and is allowed to be printed and publicized in, let's just say 2020 to 2024, right? And then we take that and send it back to someone living in 1980 to 1984, for example, or those time frames. And they read that, or maybe we sent that same publicized material back to the editors in chief that were active in 1980 to 1984. I think those editors would fall off their chairs. They would be like, "Oh my gosh, we're the New York Times. We cannot run this. We are the Washington Post. We cannot print that about a sitting U.S. president or
Exactly.
previous U.S. president. There's no way we can print that." And I don't know when this happened. And I'm gonna be honest with you. If you're listening to my voice right now and you think I'm biased, and you're like, Mike, well, the Republican, the conservatives started this first shots fired, well, then please email us, rich@AmericanWarSociety.com. Let me know. Let us know we're wrong on this. But it seems like that rhetoric, I don't know. I can't say that. That's simply my opinion, so I'm not going to give my opinion. But it seems like the shots were fired, no pun intended, in terms of the rhetoric years ago. And I was like, oh, wow. Oh, it's okay to say that? Some of these actors, I don't know. I don't have any recollection. And Rich, maybe we need to do more research on this. And audience, do some research for us, please. do we know of anybody that is middle or conservative that's an actor or an actress or any kind of influencer or individual in the media that has publicly said some of the things that the general left has said about Trump? Can we, are we being objective on that? I might be wrong. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I tried to look for some of it. You can find obviously where he's calling the Biden unflattering things, and that's not what I'm talking about. You can say the guy's a clown and do all the things you want to. That's fine. But when you're saying he's a threat to democracy, him and his followers are a threat. Because we gave a portion of this Monday. Will Wood and I, my host on co-host on Monday morning shows where we talk about economics and current events, and he said he had a good point. He said, I have reached out to Donald, and Jill and I are worried about him. This is coming from President Biden. He said, why would you say that? If you really said this man's a threat to democracy, he's like, if I heard that bin Laden had been shot, I wouldn't get on the news. I'm praying for bin Laden and his wives and his children there in Islamabad. I hope they're okay. You wouldn't do that. So to me, it's gaslighting. It's disingenuous.
Well, politics is the land of the fake, man.
Of course.
Where did we forget that? How about that?
Yeah.
Where did we forget along the way that politicians and politics are the land of the fucking fake? Literally. Yeah. Sorry. Nope. For my verbiage this morning, I've said the F word twice and never said it on the show, but I'm so irritated and so pissed off. We have lost our way in that aspect. It's like, come on, folks. They literally lie for a living. When did we forget that? I think we need to have a huge party, with all the liberal left-leaning Democratic or independents and all the right conservatives, and you leave your baseball bats and guns at home and just get together and have a beer and remind ourselves that politicians are professional liars, and our government has taxed us and spent us into, what is the deficit right now, Rich?
34 trillion.
Come on, man. Wake up, folks. We all need to wake up. Slap ourselves a couple sides. Walk over, shake your neighbor's hand. Walk across the street, say, hey, I see your Democratic sign. I love that, man. Just want to say I'm Mike Seeklander. Let's go have a beer. Let's talk about this a little bit, because those politicians are idiots. That's what they are, man.
Yeah. Well, you were saying, where's the conservative blame in this? And I want to go, if you want to go back to it, and people are going to throw stones at old Rich Brown, but I have always been interested in these political operatives like Lee Atwood, read his book, Ed Rollins, there's a Mike Devers, there's a whole lot of conservative political folks. I read their book, and I believe it was Lee Atwater who come up with the idea of wedge issues, creating a wedge issue, finding the one thing that I can wedge in between to push you to the right and you to the left, whether that's abortion or guns or things of this nation.
100%, man.
Because 90% of what we believe in as a country, maybe 85%. It's getting pretty crazy, but for the most part, we all want our families to succeed. We want our children to grow up and be safe, et cetera, et cetera. But when we find those things like, I'm not budging on this issue, and you're going, man, I'm not either. Okay, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree, fist bump, but we're not doing that. We're going, oh, well, I hate you. That's the problem. And that leads us to step 3, man, violence. That's where this goes. And let's talk about it real quick. This again is from X. Joe Biden said, I have one job, and that's to beat Donald Trump. I'm absolutely certain I'm the best person to be able to do that. So we're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye. And that was just a week before the shooting attempt. Again, this language has consequences. And as we saw, this is a terrifying shot, Mike. I'm sure you and a lot of folks watching, if you're listening to us, you're in a podcast, it's the picture of the bullet flying past Donald Trump's head. It's terrifying. Absolutely.
Have we confirmed is that a legitimate picture? Do we know?
It is a legitimate picture, yeah.
And that's the bullet before the bullet that hit him, correct?
That may be the one that actually struck him, because you can see him wincing right there. See that?
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Chilling, man. So the violence in and of itself, I mean, it was bound to happen. I've been saying this on our Monday morning show forever. They're going to have to kill the guy. That's what they're going to do, because look what they've done, Mike. They've tried to take him off the ballot. That didn't work. Supreme Court stepped in. Okay. All right. Well, crap. What can we do now? We can find four or more politically motivated prosecutors to try to do something. Well, great. Let's do it. Bring them down here. Let's let our White House in-house counsel. And we've got receipts for this. We'll help work with them to try to put this guy in prison. Okay. So they do that. They get him indicted on 34 felonies, which they had to up them from misdemeanors just to get it, to try to put him in prison. That's not working. What are we going to do? I said, well, shit, they're going to have to kill the guy. I've said that on the show before. And I don't say it flippantly, but I mean, I don't know. This only goes one place. So let's talk about step 4, ineffectual leadership, preparation, and response. And this is where a lot of folks in our community are just dogpiling on the Secret Service. So before we go any further, guys, look at the images. These are brave men and women. You see the guys spread out there on top of Trump. This guy's probably thinking, well, I love you, honey, I'm never going to see you again. You can see by the posture here, this is professional. Now, are there things that could have been done better? Of course, man. Hindsight is 2020. But I want to be very clear that this is not a bash on the men and women that were out there doing the job that day. Mike, anything to add on to that?
I certainly do have a couple things to add. Number one, Rich and I talked specifically about this yesterday. I have worked with and trained individuals in the Secret Service. I have some potential training opportunities in the future. And I will tell you that if you think about that for just a moment in time, shots were fired. His immediate close protective detail responded by covering him with their bodies, which is a typical protective detail maybe response. They know there's an active shooter. There are multiple shots fired from a rifle. They hear these shots. They probably heard the whiz and they probably heard the impact, I'm suspecting, because the bullets were right there. And they covered this guy up with their bodies, thinking at any moment in time they could be shot in the back or the head. A lot of folks are poo-pooing on their response and how they moved him out of the area. I have certainly seen much more organized teams move the protectee at points in time. But I can't tell you that I've seen a more organized team do it in an actual real life attempted assassination of a president, former president, or presidential candidate. So we're like, well, you should see this team move their guy and how good of a job they did. Maybe not in real life, maybe in training that was fast. That was awesome. Great job. The counter sniper facts. There's a lot of stuff out there. I actually saw a great video by a politician online on Instagram recently, and he talks about the response of the counter sniper team and how fast they actually responded. And I know there's some facts out there potentially, or at least some maybe current opinions that there was a potential threat that they were made aware of at some point in time. A guy with a rangefinder. Rich, you might add some more details, and a lot of those things tend to maybe demonstrate a failure on the security aspect. I would suspect that from the security posture, and I know that a lot of folks, once again, are poo-pooing, there's a lot of things to learn. So I would hope that agency and those agents learn from that. If you were to ask Mike Seeklander, I would tell you that there are some gun handling issues that if we watch the whole thing in slow-mo and slowed it down, I might consider telling any federal agent or any plainclothes individual or any police officer or even civilian protective officer, you got to know your gear. You got to train with it on a regular basis. You got to train your draws from all kinds of varying positions. You got to train your concealed draws. You've got to modify your suit jacket to facilitate a better job of drawing by making it heavier weight. You should if you own a paddle holster, you should throw your paddle holsters away, like literally go to the trash and throw them away. You're an idiot if you're carrying them, because if you end up in a close fight or a situation where you have to do some weird seated draw or dynamic draw, there's a good chance your paddle will come off if you end up fighting on the ground. And this is a close-in environment. If you're a protective agency, you should know these things. So you should train with your gear to the point where it becomes second nature. If you are, and I will give this as an opinion, if you are on a protective detail that is protecting any human, we're talking about a life. I'm not going to say that any human is more important than others, but certainly I would say that the president of the United States or a presidential candidate or former president is important enough where if they lose their life, it could have consequences for hundreds or thousands or millions of people. If you are a protective agent for that individual and your gun handling skills aren't nearly as good as an elite tier one operator, let's just say, use them as an example, you're wrong. You are 100% wrong. And the tier one operators that I've seen that have freaking fantastic gun handling skills pretty much across the board do so because they gunfight or they know they're probably going to get into a gunfight, and they train like that. They train like they're actually going to have that circumstance. So if you're a badge carrier, local, state, federal, of any entity, and you're not taking that level of responsibility serious, poo-poo on you, shame on you.
Yep.
You should stand in front of a mirror and slap the shit out of yourself and start training. It doesn't take that much effort. It is not what you're going to get in the Secret Service Academy or the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. You're not going to get enough. So take responsibility. But then again, Rich, I've been talking about that for 20 years now. Take responsibility for your own survival. That's American Warrior Show mantra number one. And, I've had 18-year-old kids, Rich, show up in class. I'm sorry, a 17-year-old kid show up in a class carrying concealed with a Glock 19 at one point in time that had gun handling and manipulation skills that were some of the best I've ever seen from deep concealment. And this guy was a nobody.
Yeah.
So federal agents, if you're not willing to put in the work, turn the badges in, boys and girls.
Yeah. I just went to a school out in your neck of the woods out in Oklahoma with Simon Golub. I'm going to have him on the show soon over at pistol-training.com. And there was a guy in there. I wish I remember his name. He's an electrical engineer. I mean, incredible gun handler, incredible shooting. And he's like, I spend my days in the cubicle so that I can come out here and do this. Now, if he's going to take it that serious and be as good a shooter as I've ever seen, gun handler, his gear was perfect, his weapon handling is perfect, his firearm, it's just fantastic, then what's your problem? Now, some inside baseball, Mike, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but you and I have seen when the buses full of government students show up and the gearboxes from the armory show up and they start handing out holsters. You and I have been like, where did these damn holsters come from? And it's like, well, some guy in procurement said, we needed to have 48 holsters. So they just went online and bought these. And I said, it's trash. So some people don't know what they don't know. And again, poo-poo on you, man. The information is out there. This is the age of the internet. It doesn't take long to figure out what holster's junk, or once you start training with it and you're, oh, this is crap, then it's time to do something about it.
Right. Let's put the paddle holster on and on a stupid thin belt and a jacket and, some vests and practice 50 draws a day. And you're like, oh, this sucks. I can't get the gun out of the holster. Guess what? When you're protecting a presidential candidate, you think the gun's going to come out of the holster any easier? When you've got to dive to your left and protect him and then possibly draw your firearm, do you think the draw is going to be easier or harder? We need to embrace in law enforcement and anybody that is a gun carrier a culture of training, and we've gotten away from that. It just become this tool that highly trained federal agents and baloney, right? They're not highly trained. If you go to the academy and you graduate from, Secret Service Basic and then Secret Service Protective Details, Advanced Protective Details, or the FBI Academy or the DEA Academy or whatever name, put whatever label you want to it, you are not a gun handler. You are not until you take that same training that you've had a tiny piece of and now work at it and ingrain it to the point where I wrote an article many years ago. It said the title is "You're going to be in a gunfight tomorrow." So if you knew you were going to be in a gunfight tomorrow, and of course tomorrow is the proverbial always tomorrow, how would you train and prepare? Would you not have the ability to draw your handgun out of the holster? And I get it, under crazy stress, crazy heat, you're sweating, you probably got some sort of a plate on or a vest on or whatever else, and you didn't train with that kind of gear. Well, then shame on you. Once again,
Yeah.
find those failure points. And,
Yeah.
I mean, I can't assess a lot about some of the protective details, what they did, but I can tell you what I saw in terms of gun handling and
We're going to
those.
get there, Mike. Yeah, I'm going to take you. I'm going to take you there here in just a second. But before we go there, let's talk about the counter snipers real quick. This, I believe, is off of Task and Purpose, where they actually looked, and there's 18 elevated positions, and I believe I've heard there were 4 different counter sniper teams. Although that could just mean I don't think they were running like a traditional military sniper and observer. It looked like they were both on the glass and on the gun at the same time, which could be a problem. We can think about that. But this is in the moments leading up to this. So it would appear from the elevated tripod position that he's going to mount that firearm on here in just a moment, that they didn't have the ability to hit that position. So that was a part of they're looking farther out than 135 meters. Tony says the bar at federal training, that Fed training in firearms, is extremely low. And it is. You know why? Because it's a funnel, man. It's just like any other school. I've taught at the School of Infantry, man. I can tell you there's kids that I'm like, man, I do not want to send this guy to the Fleet Marine Force. He's not ready. But he makes it through the funnel somehow.
Rich, what is separated, in my experience, the really good shooters and gun handlers and all of the other agencies and units that I've worked with? 2 things. You know what they are?
Oh, what?
Number one, those that fight for a living tend to be really good. Like a Spartan, man. You're going to get in a sword fight tomorrow. You're going to be good with your sword and your spear. Guess what? Because if not, it's your butt. You're going to die. They're really, really good. It's not like, well, hey, we need to be really good to be at this level. No, they're really good because they're fighters. That's number one. The second is leaders.
Yeah.
Individual units that should not be as good as they are, with a good leader that leads from the front, are highly skilled. And I'll give you some examples. Las Cruces PD, I think currently, and maybe back in the day, when our buddy Pat Doyle was overseeing a lot of the firearms training and some of the competitive shooting, those guys and gals were just freaking warriors.
Oh, yeah.
They were gun handlers to the point where they were wearing out duty guns and rifles because they had a leader. The Oklahoma State TAC team, fantastic. I would put those guys against most of the tier 1 units or tier 1 operators that I've been around here and there. They're maybe not on par on some skill level things, but very, very close. Those guys, because they had a leader that was a shooter and a trainer, and he was fit and he led from the front. That's the difference. The fighters, because they know they're going to be in a fight. If you're going to be in the octagon tomorrow, man, you're going to prepare. If you have a leader, that leader is going to lead from the front, and your skills are going to increase. So here's a call out to all of you federal agencies out there. Those leaders in those federal agencies, be a leader. Take your boys and girls to the range. Take them to a class. Fund a class. Get them dry firing. Do something. Be a leader.
Yeah, man, let's talk about that for a second, because everybody wants to stack up on the training. Oh, they need more training. Screw that. I'm not going to use the F word, Mike. I think you've done it enough. Screw that, because you and I, when we were broke as a joke, young 20-somethings, we took our own money and our own time and invested it in ourselves and our training to get better. I wasn't waiting on my fat ass sergeant at the police department to get me there. I knew he didn't have the stones to take me where I wanted to go, because it's my life on the line, not his. His fat ass is sitting back in the break room or the squad room. I'm out there. So I say all that to say it really comes down to leadership. I mean, think about it. Do you want 100 lions led by one lamb, or do you want 100 lambs led by a lion? I know which one I'm going to pick. So 100%. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. Well, they need training, they need gear, they need technology. No, they don't. They need somebody who's not afraid to say, we're going to do it. And I'm telling you,
freaking leadership, man. Leadership.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I remember being a platoon commander one time, and the first sergeant comes diddy bopping over. Is like, hey, you need to You need to have your guys take their beanies and gloves off. I'm like, not happening. Well, you can't tell me that. Yes, I just did. I don't know. I don't think you know what the word commander means. Have a nice day. It's like, well, yeah, but all the other platoons don't have it. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm not taking protective equipment off of my Marines because some asshat over there in another platoon doesn't have their stuff. And if that means you need to relieve me, then go do it. Go with God, brother. So then the company commander comes over. Hey, didn't you hear what he said? I'm like, I don't give a shit what he said. Fire my ass. And I'll take this all the way up the chain. You want me to have protective equipment for my Marines taken off? Would we do this on the range? Take your earbuds out. Take your iPro off because some asshat doesn't have it. I don't give a shit. And you have to be willing to do that for your fucking people. I'm sorry. And
No,
if
you
you're
did.
not, you don't deserve, I'm
I love it.
sorry. But if you don't deserve that position, man.
Well,
And
here's the deal,
that's
dude. You just made a beautiful point, and I wanna pound it home. You said, because that tends to be the way when we're judging law enforcement or whoever. We're like, yeah, they need more training. What they need more? I'm going to raise that flag right there with you, Mr. Rich Brown. That was a well said thing. Bullshit. They need more leadership, and they need to take responsibility. And I'll speak to every single individual. And I'm going to start from the very bottom. Any individual that is an armed defender, that you believe you have the Second Amendment right to carry a gun because it was granted to you by the Constitution, but you have no responsibility to training, piss off. You're an idiot. If you don't have the current skills, take a class. If you don't practice, put the gun up. Number two, if you are in law enforcement and you're looking for your agency to provide more training, and anybody listening to this show is not that person, I guarantee you, but maybe forward the show to someone so they can hear my voice. Piss off. Take responsibility. If you're a leader in law enforcement, lead your people. Tell them to get their quick 50 dry fire reps from their holster every single morning. Secret Service agents, protective agents. Guess what? Put your jacket on, unload the gun safely, go to a safe area, and do 50 dry fire drills every time. And then step left and step right and lean left and lean right. And then figure out how you're going to draw the gun with one hand while you're moving your protectee or whatever else. Stop being, since we're saying all these asshats that say that, you as a civilian were granted your right to carry your gun because the Second Amendment said so. Good for you. You got to be trained. And if you don't have any training, put the gun in the safe until you get some training. Law enforcement, same thing. If you graduated the academy and that's all you're willing to do, piss off. Do something. Go above and beyond. Like I said, I had a 17-year-old kid that would outdraw, outmanipulate, and outshoot 99% of my students out there. And this kid just put the work in. He had wore the finish off of the slide of his Glock 19 by doing dry fire manipulations. I wish he knew his name. I don't even know who this kid was. I was amazed at how good he was. He just put the work in, folks. Right. So if you're
remember little BJ Norris, man.
BJ Norris is a competitive shooter. Anybody who's a competitive shooter.
I'm talking about when he was a teenager. He's just some little teenager.
Yeah, but the competitive shooters, they love it. That's their hobby. So they're already doing all this work. It's the people that are like, nah, I'm not going to do that competitive shooting shit. And I'm not going to do any training because God granted me the right to carry this firearm and protect myself, folks. Shame on you. I'm going to say, I got poo-pooed on a long time ago when I said, people should be required to have some training, because requires, like you may say, Rich, well, I'm an independent and who's going to require it? Who's going to moderate that? Who's going to, I don't know who's requiring it. Maybe some universal being should require that folks train on their own and practice.
With great power comes great responsibility, right?
100%.
I mean, God has granted you the power to carry this implement of death and destruction. That comes with a responsibility, man. Let me tell you one final thing when it comes to leadership. I won't say where you and I were, but we were training one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the country, top 5. And there was something inappropriate that happened on the range. Do you remember where I'm going with this? I'm not going to call them out, but I'm like, I said, Sergeant, you want to say anything? No. Like captains? You don't say anything? Okay. Then I'm going to wade into it. Because what I allow to happen in my presence is my standard, and I dressed everybody down. And I wasn't there to do that. I'm just there to teach people how to teach. But the problem is I, as a leader, I will not allow that kind of stuff to take place. And if you need to fire me, put me on the plane, and send me home right now, that's fine. But I was a director of a leadership academy, and I know what good leadership looks like. And this is a complete abject failure of leadership. Now we can talk about as the picture I've got up here right now, where the snipers were and where the body was and all that stuff. And people will talk about that for a while. And I hear a lot of this, why didn't he take the shot? He's up there. He could see, he could take the shot. Look, man, Graham v. Connor, Tennessee versus Garner. There's a whole lot of case law and Supreme Court law that dictates when and where and how force of any kind can be used, up to and including deadly force. And Graham v. Connor is in effect, man. And it says this, quote, an officer's evil intentions will not make a Fourth Amendment violation out of an objectively reasonable use of force, nor will an officer's good intentions make an objectively unreasonable use of force constitutional. So he cannot take that shot until he's certain. And here's the thing. When you're looking in that position, put yourself in that guy's position for a minute, and there's confusion, right? We talk about the fog of war. What the hell's going on? Who is this guy climbing on the roof? Should he be there? He's kind of got urban camo on. I mean, he's got long hair. My spidey senses are tingling, but I'm not cleared to shoot this guy just because he's crawling on a roof and shouldn't be there. I mean, even if you, and I'm sure with that scope, Mike, you know damn well 130 feet, 135 meters away with that level of an optic, he's looking at the freckles on this kid's face as he's crawling across there. So he cannot legally and lawfully take that shot because it could be the wrong. He cannot shoot a warning shot. He can get on the radio, which I know they did, and they had officers scrambling to get over there and see what the hell is going on. The only thing I would say is, having been in a position where I've got all the slack taken out of the trigger, I'm at the wall, I've got a suspect reaching underneath his seat on a traffic stop one time. I'm telling him to put his hands up. He doesn't. I'm at the wall. As soon as I see those hands come up with anything, I'm taking the shot. So in this regard, you know, I would like to think that he's on the trigger and I'm looking, man, if your finger goes inside that trigger guard, your head's going to come apart, because he cannot shoot until at least that moment. What are your thoughts?
Well, so I agree with all that, Rich, but I do want to make a point on a couple things. Number one, I don't know enough about the Secret Service procedure or PSD teams
rules of engagement.
Rules of engagement. I would say procedures at this point in time. I would hope that we will see a fair and objective investigation internally and externally, where Secret Service reviews what happened that day, who did what, how they did it, and then lay it all out and then address the issues and say, hey, all these things happened the way they were supposed to, and all these things didn't occur the way they were supposed to. I would think that as an agency, hopefully they would do that. I hope they would do that. But I say that to an extent, understanding that all federal agencies, unfortunately, are led by appointees, which is where a lot of the problems at the federal level, and the federal agents that are listening to this right now know that. Like, yeah, that's correct. Because you have this idiot politician that's in charge of our agency. That was appointed by the idiot politician that happens to be in office at that point in time. But I will tell you this: I shot with the Secret Service counter snipers several years during the Marine Corps and the divisional matches, and I shot with them later on at a couple 3-gun matches. And I have had some Secret Service individuals in a variety of classes that I taught. And the counter snipers that I shot with were freaking incredible individuals.
We just had one in New Jersey, remember?
Yeah, there was. They were really good shot.
Yeah.
They were just highly squared away, great individuals, great agents. I have nothing positive to say about them.
Nothing negative to say.
Or excuse me, nothing negative, please. Yeah, hear that correctly. Nothing negative, nothing but positive to say about them. And they described their job to me in a manner where I distinctly remember them telling me that you could not or should not be able to get onto a roof within 1,000 meters of any U.S. president. Now that said, I honestly, there are a lot of things going on, man. A fog of war. I think they responded pretty quickly. I mean, the fact that this guy got up there, that's what I hope the investigation shows, is how this guy got up there. Was there previous knowledge that there was a possibility of a guy in the area with the rangefinder? The local police officers that responded and climbed up to the roof, and the guy started to point the gun? Why were we not blaring on the radio? And I don't care. We get a presidential candidate over there, 150 yards. I mean, either you're gunfighting or you're not. Get up there, do something like immediate. But I don't know any of those facts. I'm just speculating based on what I'm hearing. So I'm just saying to the Secret Service counter snipers, for my opinion, to an extent, good job. But I don't know your policy, so can't weigh in on that. I could just weigh in on who the individuals I shot with before, and they were highly trained and really good shots.
Yeah, so we've used the word fog of war a couple times, so I went ahead and put in the fog of war is simply a metaphor to describe certain factors that are often found in these types of situations, like ambiguity, chaos, friction, and uncertainty as to one's own capabilities or the capabilities of the other party. In this case, the lone gunman that's low crawling across the roof. And there's a lot of people. Was it cowardice that because somebody's on the radio like, hey, look, there's people on the ground. They're saying that there's somebody crawling on the roof. And as I understand it, I've heard a couple different versions. We won't know until the investigation comes out, that he's on the shoulders of another officer, looks over the roof, and then the kid points his rifle at him and he falls backward, what have you. But from that moment, there's 86 seconds before he opens fire. Think about how fast that is. From the time that the guy falls and he says, oh shit, there's somebody up there with a gun. Now, even if you're that officer and you see somebody pointing your rifle, it's not unreasonable to think it could be part of the detail, and that, oh my God, they're pointing a gun at me because they think I'm about to get on the roof. I mean, again, we're talking about chaos, friction, uncertainty. So I'm not really blaming anybody. This stuff's going to happen.
Man, it's so interesting that you made that point, because that's one of the things in one of the videos that I watched on Instagram. You're like, for example, the point you just made. I'm like, oh crap, I didn't think about that. That's a great point. But I would hope that we would have, as a security briefing or team, we would know which roofs are covered, which roofs aren't covered, what specifically the uniform of the day is. And if you're in the Secret Service right now, listen to this, or some other protective entity, reach out to us. Because I think I'm correct in that we would have some sort of security pre-briefing. The ones I was pre-briefed in a very long time ago, I don't remember where I was. It's like, hey, here's the state guys, here's their uniform, here's what they look like. Secret Service will generally look like this. They're going to be on this frequency. Here's your local SWAT team that is supporting this effort. So those things are pretty known. So if it's 86 seconds after that, I can't imagine a guy popping down and immediately, in some sort of a blaring manner, being on the radio. I got a man with a gun, a man on the roof with a gun. I don't know if he's protective service. I mean, but I just can't imagine how we hadn't responded. And I think that as a police officer, Rich, I think I would look at this 20-year-old individual and their clothing and their firearm. I think we could pick out cops. I don't know who popped his head over the roof. We'll find out. Once again,
I tell you, you and I have seen some undercover narcotics cops that you would never. I mean, they look like,
and these
looks like a.
I love the conversation, because these are things we need to say. Oh, who's passing judgment? We weren't there, and it's certainly easy to pass judgment online these days. So I'm not going to. It's really great point.
Yeah, and Tony says a good deal of the fog can be mitigated by proper previous planning. He's absolutely right, and that's what Mike's speaking to. All the work in the pre-brief, all the advanced work is where the failures really fall, which again is why I go back to it's a leadership failure. Yeah. It truly, truly is. A couple other things I want to highlight here. This is an interesting comment I read yesterday, Mike, from Valerie Fennell. She said, nobody contacted me. Nobody called me. Nobody stopped here. And her home backs up to the fairgrounds. She says, quote, I kind of was thinking that as close as my house is, that I honestly thought this might be part of the command station at some point. And it wasn't. Just Fennell, who wasn't contacted by law enforcement. She said her entire neighborhood was bafflingly left alone despite their proximity to the rally grounds, which again speaks to what we're saying as far as the pre-work, the advanced work. Now, here's another thing. The Secret Service has got it right day in and day out on all their protectees since Reagan's attempted assassination in 1981. So they've done a phenomenal job, but the bad guy only he can get it right once.
That's
and
right.
we're having these conversations. So when asked about the role of the local police in securing the event, George Bivens, a lieutenant colonel in the Pennsylvania State Police, told reporters that typically provides support for VIP visits, but takes its instructions from the Secret Service. Again, the Secret Service is running the show. So he says, quote, Secret Service always has the lead on securing something like this. Lieutenant Colonel Bivens said, we work with them to provide whatever is requested by the Secret Service, but they're the lead in that security. Security Service Director Kimberly Cheadle. And again, there's a lot of stuff online saying Kimberly Cheadle, she was a former Pepsi Cola executive before coming here. That's not true. She did work for Pepsi as their security analyst. Her former job, I think 27 years, she was a Secret Service agent. She was on Biden's previous detail when he was vice president. So this isn't her first rodeo. She should know better. So anyway, she said local police were inside the building at the time of the shooting and that it was their role to secure the building roughly 120 to 150 meters away, yet outside the hard perimeter within a line of sight. So she's casting blame. And again, terrible leadership here. She's blaming the local cops, when in reality, they're just going to do whatever you ask. They're happy to help. Tell me what you want. You want two guys standing up there? Not a problem. You may have a cookout up there? We'll do whatever you want. So I think it's bullshit that she's pushing the blame off on local law enforcement. What do you think?
Yeah, I would have to hear everything she's related.
Good. I got more coming.
I saw her getting poo-pooed on, certainly online, and maybe not taking responsibility. But I'm going to be honest. There are some heads of some agencies that are probably fantastic that are appointed as political appointees, and I think there are a lot of them that are not fantastic. I really, really wish that if there was one political change we would make, and this is on a different subject, I wish that our federal agencies were all headed by a vested, proven, trained individual that had been in that agency or a similar agency for their leadership skills, not for their political prowess and who they know. I mean, I really think that, I think we got a huge problem with our federal agencies because of that, because, the director of this or that is probably a political appointee, not for their leadership skills. I just think that's completely backwards. If you look at, and I know, Rich, you were an officer, so if you look at a high-level officer, there's certainly a lot of politics there, but General Schmunkty Hop is probably he has been in the Army for 20-some years. So at a minimum, he has 20-some years of leadership experience and probably leadership schools. And if he's a good general, he probably cut his teeth in a platoon commander billet or whatever else. There's a semblance and a system of leadership and leadership training where in a federal agency, someone could have been a horrible agent for 20-some years and was on Biden's detail and rubbed elbows with him and got to know him well, and he really liked her. And let's appoint a female as a head of an agency. And I'm not opposed to females being heads of agencies, but once again, it's all a political game, which is foolish. Pick the best leader. Who's going to lead those agents from the front? I wonder if she was doing her daily dry fire challenges.
I bet she wasn't.
Probably not. Why
but
not?
I don't know.
How about that? Let's call out the heads right now of the FBI, the DEA, the Secret Service, the U.S. Marshals. Are you dry fire on a regular basis? Are you leading from the front? If not, why not? Can you pass your qualifications without your folks helping you out? Can you outshoot your agents? If not, why not? Don't be an asshat. Lead from the front. Be a leader. Let's just say let's stop. Let's cut all the bullshit. Take responsibility, leadership. If not, Rich will take over the Secret Service. I'll take over the FBI. Give us a call. We'll lead from the front.
Yeah. Dr. Fuller says all military branches send you to school for each promotion, officer or enlisted. How many leadership schools did you go to in your career? I got a CV full of them, and I know Mike does, and I know Dr. Fuller does as well. By the way, Dr. Fuller's new book, Empathy for the Devil, is out on Amazon. You could pick it up today. I have read it, wrote a blurb for the book. It's fantastic. If you want to learn more about what it was like to interrogate terrorists down at Gitmo during the GWAT and be one of those shadow warriors that Dr. Fuller was, check out Empathy for the Devil, man. You will not be disappointed in that. So let's go back to the leadership failure here. This is the one that's inexcusable. This is the comment that needs to get this young lady fired, or this woman fired. She said, quote, that, and I'm quoting her now, that building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. And so, there was a safety factor that would be considered there, that we wouldn't want to put someone up on a sloped roof. She told ABC News outlet in an interview on Tuesday. And so, the decision was made to secure the building from the inside. What'd you just say?
Right.
What? It's insanity. There's a safety factor. Are you kidding me? We run to the sound of the guns. Guess what, man? That's not safe. I got news for you, man. And if you think that it's unsafe, boss, well, then I'll accept your resignation. Put it on my desk and turn in your badge and gun, man. Unacceptable leadership failure. Now let's take a look at that roof. This is an example. A lot of people probably haven't seen this picture. There's the ladder up to the roof. The next red dot is, I don't know if this is where they cut some of his clothes away. I don't know if this is a backpack. I don't know if that is a picture of the blanket he allegedly had this firearm wrapped in. But I do know that the other one is the actual AR-15 in the attempted assassination laying there on the roof. It is just a stunning failure.
Yeah. That's a slope we can't get onto. Yeah, she should resign in that case.
Yeah, I
Come on, give us something better than that, lady. I understand if you're like, hey, we made some mistakes. Potentially, we're doing a full investigation based on our policies and procedures. We'll move forward. Next question. Come on, give me a break.
Exactly. Maybe her staff failed her. You have talking points when you go into this, and I know because I remember. I won't say the general's name, but she had to brief Congress. So she came to my colonel and she said, hey, Tim, I've got to go up there. In this case, it was, hey, Paul. Hey, Paul, I got to go up there and brief Congress. So the colonel turned to me. It's like, Rich, you got the next couple of days off to just sit down and kind of war game this in your head and write some talking points that I can give to the CG. And evidently she didn't embarrass herself. But, I'm like, where in God's name did you come up with that? It's absolutely insane. Let's take a look here. Step 5 of this 6-step process is mainstream media misinformation. Let's take a look at what this looks like. These are actual screenshots here. At first, I thought this was, when I saw this, I'm like, this is a meme. They wouldn't really do this. But yes, in fact, CNN did say Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally. And then we also have some other things. The Indiana Star and other USA Today outlets said, quote, Trump removed from the stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles the former president. The Washington Post wrote, I know, man. Yeah, it's just unbelievable that this is really published. The Washington Post wrote, Trump taken away after loud noises at rally. Very specific that Political decided to kick it up a notch by writing, quote, photo of bloody Trump fist bumping immediately spotlighted by his allies. Newsweek wrote an incredible headline since deleted reading, quote, MAGA responds with outrage after Donald Trump injured at Pennsylvania rally. Are we living in a crazy world? What's going on here?
No, I think we're living in a world where media prints and post titles, clickbait titles potentially at the speed of light. So whether or not you have an algorithm or an AI or some idiot intern that decides they're going to post this as fast as they possibly can, is this misinformation at its best? Well, let's post something different so he doesn't look like quite as bad ASS as he did when he did his little fist raise, which, by the way, was maybe awesome for his presidency potential, but maybe not awesome for the possibility that someone else was shooting at him. But
it'd be one of the most iconic images in American history. That
100%. But these titles, it's like, I just think once again, if there's someone there's got to be a senior representative that probably sees some of these titles coming out or watches that. Editors in chief, you should be fired. Resign. Let's call for a bunch of resignations. Let's just start firing people. What would Donald Trump say? You're fired. You're
I would
fired.
say a lot of people won't have their job once this is over. But I talked about this on Monday's show, Mike. I have zero faith that this administration will hold anyone to account for any of these failures. And the reason I say that is I'm going to look at what they did with the Afghanistan failure. 13 American young men and women, I believe there was a female, that lost their lives at Abbey Gate. No one held accountable. General Milley gets to go and go on the lecture circuit. He retires with full honors. Secretary Lord Austin gets to keep his job. What in God's name? This is unacceptable. Dr. Fuller has an amazing point here. Says locals had the building. So what? The head of the United States Secret Service is responsible for everything that organization does or fails to do. If we can hammer a 21-year-old E5 when his fire team screws up, we can fire her. He's absolutely right. If one of my Marines wrote a bad check, I could lose my job on something that he did on vacation with his wife, writing a check, and it bounces. They're coming after me. And yet this woman still has her job. Milley had his job, and all those that were responsible for the deaths of Americans in Afghanistan, leaving behind hundreds of Americans that were left behind the lines, behind the Taliban lines, and we just abandoned them. Tens of billions of dollars of American treasure. Nobody held accountable. I expect no one to be held accountable this time, man. What do you think?
Rich, that's politics, man. You're getting too political, dude. I'm going to give you a 1-star review now because that's political. You can't prove any of that. You don't know that happened. I mean, you don't know who was responsible, and it couldn't have been the president and all of his leadership in the senior military areas. It can't be true. That's too political. I'm very offended.
Exactly. Are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? What are you going to believe?
I'm offended that you even said that, you know.
Oh my God, it's so true. Act step. So this is the 6th and final step, folks. Thanks for being with us so far here. Eric says, good old-fashioned fake news. Dr. Fuller says, Director Comer was never an FBI agent. I'm sorry, Director Comey was never an FBI agent. The only director of the FBI who had ever was an agent was Louis Freeh.
If that is true, the only agent, the only director of the FBI that was ever an agent was one. If that is correct, and I'm sure it is because Dr. Fuller obviously knows his stuff. What is wrong with us, folks? What, American public, whether you're left or right or whatever else, what is wrong? Shouldn't the leader of the FBI have been an FBI agent? Shouldn't a chief of police in a local police department have been a police officer? Shouldn't a county sheriff have been a deputy sheriff at some point in time? Come on, folks. Yeah. We have lost our way. And if nothing else, if there's something we can unite on from the left to the right, it's that bullshit. Start holding people accountable for their lack of leadership and the policies and the politicism of every single facet of our federal government. Every single facet.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. JB says, thanks, guys, for the fact-based analytics versus all the emotional rhetoric. He is coin number 2539. If you want to find out becoming a coin member of our self-preservation community is the right decision for you and your loved ones, click the links in today's show notes. 14 days free test drive on Mike and I. Highly encourage you to do that, especially with all the things going on right now. Let's get to a couple other comments here. Gerald says, so many people are tired of the politics over the last 8 years. Some only read from one source and move on with their day. That type of headline is written with them in mind. Man, he is right. So right.
It is. And I hate to say it. I guess I would be somewhat guilty of that myself. I know I am. We tend to, and that's one of the problems. That's one of the, the wedges that you were talking about, Rich, that has polarized and driven us so far apart as a country is, if you are, hey, I'll ask you a question. Let's see if you can get it right. It's going to be a multiple choice question. If you are a left-leaning Democratic voting individual, which news channel will you be watching, Rich?
MSNBC, CNN.
What the heck? Okay, here's a good one.
The View.
Okay. If you are a right-leaning, typically Republican voting individual, which news channel are you going to watch, Rich?
Fox News.
What? How did you know these things? How is that even possible? Because they polarize us and contrast us to the point where that's the way it is. And then unfortunately, that's where you're stuck. And then of course that's where the message is. That's where the message, the repeated message of MAGA Republicans. White guy.
Don't think of the blue baseball, Mike. Don't think of the blue baseball. Don't think
it's like it's repetitive. Man, we have got to get outside of there. Maybe Shut the news cycle off. Listen to podcasts. Listen to good, objective, reasonable podcasts. Or all of us maybe should turn, spend some time on Fox and some time on CNN. I'm not certain that that's a good use of your time. You
Well,
could
it
probably
is.
spend your time on
I tell
either.
you,
But
Mike, listen, you got to triangulate the news these days. I'm telling you, man. Every morning I go Fox, CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, Reuters,
yeah,
and I triangulate the news because if there might be 3 paragraphs in, and that's another thing that this current mainstream media does, and that is the headline says one thing, but if you read 3 paragraphs down, it contradicts the headline. The headline is just the attention grabber, and it's going to conform to your bias, whatever bias you hold, and then you read down and it completely flips. I've seen that so many times, but you do have to triangulate the news.
it's all a system of bullshit.
Yeah.
They're not. Guess what, folks? Here's the deal. Here's a little. People probably don't know this, Rich. Our wise audience certainly does. We don't have TV as a form of entertainment because whoever invented the TV show wanted to entertain us in the evenings. We have TV, television, radio, and all of these other things as a source of advertising. So the more
Yes.
eyes you get on your website, TV show, etc., the more people you can advertise to. And the deeper and bigger and badder and scarier the headline is, the more of a chance you'll go, oh, I'm going to click on that. It's called clickbait. We know that, of course, now that we live in the age of the internet. It's like, hey, man, why do hospitals exist? Well, hospitals exist to treat us and fix us and make us better. No, they exist to make a profit.
Amen. That's
Why
right.
does a bank exist, Rich? A bank exists to hold your money because you needed a place to hold your money. No, bank exists to make a freaking profit. So do all
Yes.
these media outlets, and that's what the clickbank. We have if you look at how we live in an entirely fake world. And I get it. Advertising, people got to make money. We sell something. The American Warrior Society wants to sell something. Everybody
We
wants
have
to sell something.
sponsors.
We have sponsors.
Full
We want to
disclosure.
sell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the bottom line is everything we look, everywhere we read, everything we do is generally fake. So if you look at Fox News or CNN News, they just happen to be owned by generally conservative or generally more liberal individuals and that's where their funding comes from. And now they tend to become obviously they're political talk shows. That's all they are. There's almost no independent source of news these days or information unless you're listening to podcasts, and there's some great podcasts out there. But it's so funny, man. We have lost our way, and I am scared to death for the 20-year-olds out there that are not objective, and because they're all simply being influenced. So whoever does the most influencing the best wins. Whoever gets in the hearts and minds of the young generation out there, the 20-year-old wins. It doesn't have to be true in any way, shape, or form. It just has to work, right? And that's how politicians work, right? Well, how do you survive? To get the next vote. Well, how do you get the next vote? Well, you get the next round of funding to get in front of more people. And then you make statements that make you stand out. That's the bottom line. Not because you're a great leader, not because you took the deficit and you reduced it, not because you avoided a war or you entered a war for the right reason and then you got us out. We won't even go down the military industrial entity out there, but we've lost our way, brother. Where do we go from here?
I don't know. The final thing I want to say on the Secret Service, because they're going to get their ass handed to them for a while, right? And again, we talked about the average agent out there, whether it's FBI, Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, any agency you want to talk about. The folks that are out there with the shoes on, carrying a gun and a badge and doing God's work, fantastic men and women. They're doing the best they can. But you need to understand something. The Secret Service job is risk mitigation, not risk elimination. You can never eliminate all the risks that are out there. But I would submit that they could have done a better job at mitigating the risk posed by that elevated position. And understanding full well, as we've already pointed out, there was at least 18 elevated positions that were in and around that where some trained shooter could have taken a shot from. So, but yeah, let's talk about the last thing here, Mike, and that is step 6, act surprised, call for calm, and then shift the blame. Let me say that again. Act surprised that this happened, call for calm, unity, and then shift the blame.
That's
So here we
politics.
go, man. It is. But President Joe Biden called for national unity at a short White House news conference Sunday night and said he spoke with Donald briefly on Saturday night. And I'm, quote, I'm sincerely grateful that he's doing well and recovering, end quote. Biden also said he would address the nation from the Oval Office. Now, here, I'm going to say this again in case you're just joining us now. Thank you for everyone watching live. If I thought this person was a threat to democracy and everything that our nation holds dear, I would not be saying I'm glad he's doing well. You know what I'm saying? I think that's disingenuous. And so here he is begging for bipartisanship from the Oval Office. And I love this gentleman here, Joe Concha, whoever he is. He's a blue check mark on X. He says, President Biden, July the 8th, 2024, quote, we're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in a bullseye. This is 5 days before the attempted assassination. Then this gentleman says, defend that. Go ahead. Try to defend that rhetoric after what we all just witnessed with Trump coming within a centimeter of being assassinated. And I would have hoped, Mike, I'm like, I would have respect for our current sitting president had he come out and said, look, I've been responsible for a lot of this rhetoric. I got to look within and say, what did I do that created a climate for this kind of thing to happen? I would go, damn, man, that's leadership. That's what leadership looks like. You're looking in the mirror and saying, man, I'm part of the freaking problem. But did he do that? Absolutely not, Mike. This man just gaslit everybody like he had never said a single thing. And it's like, okay, well, you're free. You're free to say what you want, but you're not free from the consequences. And I hope America's watching and they vote this guy out of office.
Yeah, and I will tell you, man, he didn't take responsibility. If you put the shoe on the other foot, and nor would any politician, to include the beloved Trump, who's going to play this. This needs to play this for what it's worth. I get it. Raise fist, fight, just got shot. That's pretty ballsy. Guy's got balls of steel, man. Probably needs to wheelbarrow those things out of the room. And he's been a fighter for a long time. I think that if you got back to objectives, you could look at his presidency and look at what he accomplished. If you were someone that's thinking of like, I hate him, I really hate him as a human, look at what he's accomplished. And a lot of people will probably poo-poo on that as well. But interestingly enough, man, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he would take any more responsibility than Mr. Biden. President Biden did. I don't think they would. They just don't do that. They're politicians, man. They're professional freaking liars. They lie for votes. They
what's funny?
They lie for freaking funding, and that's what they do. That's the bottom line.
When Will and I talked about this Monday, Will had said the same thing. And my only pushback on that is, and I hate that you're not going to be able to see my face if you're listening to the podcast, but when they call Trump out and he knows he's guilty, watch some of the debates. He does this, like, it's like so what? Yeah. Like, he's had sex with a porn star, and you watch him go, he's not saying no. It's a funny way of owning it. And again, it's immoral, some of the things that he's done. I've said this before. Before he came out as a conservative, this guy was a New York liberal, man. He's gone through wives like some people go through tennis shoes. It's not the life that I have as a Southern Baptist here in East Tennessee, married to my high school sweetheart. I find a lot of things that he has done and said repellent. However, we have to judge him by his actions, not the rhetoric so much. And the actions that he did when he was the president were pretty freaking good. So I want to, before we close out, man, I want to talk about this American hero here, Corey Capatero, killed covering his family with his own body while freely and peacefully assembling with his fellow countrymen. This man was the best of us. I've got a screenshot of something his daughter wrote about her father. I think this came out on Sunday. It would just tear your heart out, man. This is the kind of American we should all aspire to be, the father of two beautiful daughters, loving husband. It's just a tragedy that we lost a life like Corey's. He was truly, truly the best of us, man. Also, let's talk about the other two folks that were shot. David Dutch, 57, from Pennsylvania as well, and James Copenhaver, 74 years old. The Marine Corps League of Pennsylvania identified David Dutch as the commandant of their organization. So he's a former Marine. Semper Fi. David, I hope you're doing well, sir. He underwent surgeries this week because he was shot in the liver and the chest. Absolutely horrific, man. So prayers for those, and this is a photo that look at the people in the stands here with covered in blood from their. I mean, these are black, Asian, white, Hispanic. These are Americans. To label them as one or the other, like you talked about earlier, Mike, this white Christian nationalist and all this bullshit that the mainstream media is trying to label his followers as, I don't see that in the stands there. I see Americans of all walks of life, rich, poor, etc., just trying to peacefully assemble. And this is what bothers me. Here's David Dutch, a former Marine. If you would have asked him prior to this, do you think you'd ever get shot? He's like, well, maybe in combat. No, no, no. You got shot where you're exercising your First Amendment. This is unacceptable. And it only happened because the seeds of violence were planted and then ruthlessly watered by this administration and the mainstream media and many of our social institutions here in America, whether that's the the educational institutes or others, as well as the judicial. So everybody probably knows, if you go back to a year or two ago, I put out a 10-point scale. We're at 11 points. And really, we should probably be, because I wrote years ago that if the 45th or perhaps the 46th president was sentenced and jailed, that would be a problem. I even wrote the 45th or 46th or Speaker of the House or SCOTUS assassination would be worth 6 points. Well, I didn't factor in assassination attempt because I'm just trying to look into the future. And I base this point scale on, and I apologize if you can't look at it, but again, you can go download the PDF on, if you look at how civil wars start or how genocides start, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. So just trying to look into the crystal ball and add a point value to it. So we move away from emotion and put some analytics to it. So I tell you, just to close this thing out, man, I shudder at the thought of what might have been, how our history may have taken a turn. And I mean, literally, no pun intended, we really dodged a bullet with this, because God only knows what would be going on in our country right now. Would we have thought this was an inside job? There's still people, and it may come to pass, Mike, that there was a second shooter. There are people that say there was a shooter on a water tower. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Man, all great points. And folks, if you're wondering what we're talking about in terms of Rich's point scale, there's a show that he did a while ago that referenced a certain point system where he may decide to live in a friendly country until the U.S. settles down for a variety of reasons. If that's paraphrasing, but I'll put a link to whatever Rich wants me to in the show notes in this show. Number two, I will reiterate a few things. Number one, that the things that separate the people that are highly skilled in my mind have been both leadership and fighters. If you know you're going to be in a fight, you're probably going to prepare for the fight. Leaders can influence and make the change. So if you're a member of an organization, or maybe someone shared this show with you, which is what I hope our listening audience does, be a leader. Number two, no blame pointed anywhere, until the U.S. Secret Service does their own internal accounting and on their checks and balances and systems. No finger pointing. Certainly those that reacted in a certain manner that could be better, well, put the work in, put the effort in. And I'm going to an extent, sort of close with, in a day and age where things are so chaotic, what can we do? We could talk all we want. If this show is just about talking and rhetoric, then we would be just like everybody else. What can we do? Well, we can focus on educating ourselves. We can be objective and open-minded, and we can check out a variety of news sources and podcasts like Rich mentioned. We can read books openly, and we can read things that seem to be boring, like the U.S. Constitution and all of these other things out there. We can also take care of our family members. We can educate our family members and do our very best to influence them to read and watch and learn some things as well, especially if you have kids. You can enjoy your family members and spend time with them and do good things with them. And last but not least, you can focus, this is the most important one, on you as an individual. In a time where you don't know what's going to happen, you can focus on your health. You can focus on your conditioning. You can focus on your own defensive skills. You can focus on your medical skills. And I'm not saying that we need to plate carrier up, grab our ARs and prepare for the great war that's coming. Not at all. I'm telling you to focus on the individual, and that could simply be just spending quality time with a loved one and doing the things that we should be doing, or embracing someone across the street that has a Democratic or Republican sign in their yard that you disagree with wholeheartedly, that you think is the enemy because they could possibly vote for Biden again, and you hate Biden more than you hate anything. What, folks? Reach out to them, walk over to their garage, shake their hand, look at them as an American, and say, hey, man, what are your thoughts on this? And then go from there. And I would say that if we could do those things as individuals, we might come back together to an extent as a country. Think about the alternative. The alternative is incredibly scary. Rich, you want to close us out?
Absolutely, folks. The fight is coming. Be ready.